A few years ago, there was a game called 3D Dot Game Heroes that attempted to recreate the fun of the original 8-bit Legend of Zelda by using 3D voxel graphics. I liked the game and found it easy to recommend, but a part of me always felt like it was copying more than reinventing. It was basically just the original Zelda with better graphics. That's not the case with Songbringer, the debut release from Oakland-based developer Wizard Fu Games. While it bears more than a passing resemblance to a certain Nintendo classic, Songbringer actually bothers to come up with some original ideas. Whether or not those new ideas actually improve on the theme is certainly worth talking about. This is the story of a young man named Rock, who is one of the crew members aboard the starship Songbringer. They've anchored near the planet of Exira, which I'm sure you already know is 2 jumps deep along Orion and right next to the star Bellatrix. Anyway, the planet is supposed to be abandoned after the Great War, but when they send down a scouting party, something goes seriously wrong. Our hero and his robot buddy Jib are struck by an unexpected bolt and sent falling to their deaths. The good news is that they don't die. Rock and Jib wake up on a mysterious planet with a mission to locate his fellow crewmates and re-establish communication with the Songbringer. But here's the bad news. Mere minutes into his quest, Rock decides to take a glowing sword and accidentally unleashes a terrible curse on the planet. Little does he know how much that rash decision is going to complicate his life. Songbringer is a procedurally generated adventure game where the goal is to travel through a series of dungeons and kill all the monsters. It's also about finding the crew, but let's be honest. The real star here is fighting large monsters and solving puzzles. We'll pick up a large variety of weapons, collect the hundreds of items, clear out every dungeon, and even travel back to the ship to combine objects. Best of all, you can tackle a lot of this game in any order you want. Though some of the later dungeons will definitely kick your butt if you don't have enough health. Now, when I say that the world is procedurally generated, I don't want you to take it to mean that Songbringer is a roguelike. It's not. I mean, it can be if you fiddle around with the options, but by default, it's not. It's also not the kind of procedurally generated where everything feels random and thrown together by a computer. It is thrown together by a computer, obviously, but it gives off the impression that some care was put into the construction of the world and the dungeons. Had I not known going in, there's a chance that I would have gone through a large chunk of this game not even realizing it was procedurally generated. That said, you do run into some of the problems so common with this style of game. Probably the most obvious is that you'll start to notice the recycled rooms used throughout the different dungeons. Thankfully, there's enough variety here to where that's rarely an issue. But there are moments that will remind you how this world was constructed. What I found that I really liked about Songbringer was the combat. Not necessarily the hacking and slashing, but just how many different weapons you can hold at once. There's a top hat that works like a boomerang that can pick up items from far away. Bombs that can be used to open up new areas. A blink orb that'll get you out of trouble, and more. All these moves and more are mapped to the different buttons, so there are always a lot of ways to kill the monsters. Sure, the game is occasionally challenging and maybe even a little frustrating, but it's not because of the gameplay. Now, have I mentioned how much I love the graphics? Because I do. I love the way this game looks. It uses a distinct style that simultaneously evokes the spirit of the original Legend of Zelda while having a completely different look. It's not really how old school games looked, but rather how I imagine they look in my head. I never once got bored of exploring the procedurally generated world because I never wanted to stop looking at the graphics. My one major complaint is the game feels a bit repetitive at times. I had a problem where the dungeons started to blur together, though there is some effort to add new elements in each one. I couldn't shake the concern that if the world of Songbringer was the same for everybody, perhaps the developers would have been able to play around with more compelling puzzles and dungeon designs. On the other hand, I can see the appeal of playing through the game multiple times with different layouts. There's certainly a trade-off, both good and bad. Songbringer is an adventure game that takes inspiration from the original Legend of Zelda and creates something fresh and fun. It doesn't merely take the popular tropes, but builds on them and shoves them into a procedurally generated world. It's occasionally repetitive, and some may balk at the challenge, but it couldn't take my eyes off this debut release from Wizard Fu Games. You're in for a real treat. Hey, thanks for watching our review. So here's the question of the day. What's your favorite game that was inspired by The Legend of Zelda? Look, this is a broad question, so don't get too hung up on is it a Zelda clone or not. For example, I count Beyond Oasis and Landstalker, while others might make a convincing argument for Okami. So go ahead and let me know in the comments below. Also, I think I'm going to start randomly giving away free games and prizes when people answer the question of the day, so stay tuned for more information. I recommend you click the subscribe button and support what we're doing here. Until then.